So on the Girlz Ink studio Instagram account, we posted a little video a few days ago of me tattooing an eyebrow, and we featured 2 movements that I use a lot in my powder brow work. Well, actually all the work procedures that I do. Circular movements and the shoveling movements. And it was like a 30 second video, Olivia? Yeah. And it got like almost 7,000 views and great comments, lots of great feedback. And we interacted with all the messaging and comments and whatnot. But there was some comments that struck me. No, and let me put out there first that none of them were offensive, rude, snide, not in any way.
Right.
At all. But I just felt there was some misconceptions, maybe, about these 2 movements with some of the comments.
I agree with that. Yes.
Yeah. So I thought, what a great podcast to kind of highlight those questions posed and clear some things up and talk about it. Does that sound good to you?
Sounds excellent to me.
I'm probably going to do most of the talking today.
You will.
I know. I think I always do. Well, when it comes to PMU.
Right. When it comes to shopping.
When it comes to shopping, girl, I don't speak.
You just listen.
I just listen and I do what I'm told. Okay. So the premise was a little 30-second video of me tattooing an eyebrow, highlighting and featuring and talking about, explaining both the circular movement and the shoveling movement. So the circular movement is like, exactly what it sounds like, moving your needle in circles, circular movements. And then the shoveling movement is a little bit of a back and forth movement with your needle. So let me see. So the comment
You're going to read the comment?
I'm going to read the comment.
Okay.
Yeah. And I didn't write down like who said the comment. I mean, they can probably go to this post and look it up. But like I said, it was absolutely nothing offensive whatsoever. That's not why I'm talking about this. I just found it kind of fascinating and it struck me. And I thought this would be just some really good material to talk about. And
maybe clarify a little.
And enlighten people. And I love talking about PMU and tattooing and movements and needles and color and everything PMU. Right? Every chance I get.
You think?
Even on our dates. You have to warn me, no talking about PMU or work when we have our date night. But it's really hard for me.
Yeah, it's hard for me too.
Yeah, now. Yeah. Right? Okay. So the one comment, let's start with this comment. The one's comment, it started out, she says, old school versus new school. It's a technique I use to get more remplissage. And I had to look that up. So it's a French word that means more filling or padding.
Pretty word.
Very pretty word. So the word to key in on here, old school versus new school. So I'm like, she thinks the way I'm moving or tattooing is old school. Or does she think it's new school?
Oh, right.
Didn't really.
Yeah, I would have assumed she thought it was old school also,
Yeah,
but maybe she doesn't.
No, but I think she did. My first instinct is, she's terming these movements as old school. So that's her comment. Old school versus new school. It's a technique I use to get more remplissage. And it's probably pronounced a whole lot prettier than that, like remplissage, right?
Yeah.
But I'm saying it like like a New Englander, right? But it means more filling, which she's correct. She's absolutely correct. Like when you combine the circular movement with a larger needle, there is no movement needle combination that implants more color than that.
Right.
The circular movement combined with a larger needle, like a large shader or a mag needle. No movement technique combo implants more pigment than that combo, right?
Right.
And what needle technique implants the least amount of pigment? Single needle pointillism,
Right.
right? Okay, so
I
she
knew
was.
that.
Huh?
I knew that.
You knew that? So she was absolutely correct. And it wasn't a rude comment. It was just a statement. And I didn't take it as rude at all. But then right after that comment, a gal, Wendy, she posted this. And she tagged me. Do you agree that the difference between old school powder brows and new school powder brows are these techniques and depth? So then I'm like, okay.
You're on.
Yeah, they do think, well, I'm not saying Wendy thinks that. She's asking me.
Right.
I think she also took that first comment as the circular and the shoveling movement
It's
are
old school. Yeah.
are old school. So she was just asking me, do I agree that the difference between old school powder brows and new school powder brows are those techniques and depth? And I couldn't get that out of my mind. All right. I mean, I woke up the next morning and I told you about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had already read it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what, I mean, I know you're not a tattooer, but you've just been around me in PMU, like, you know, for so many years. You could do it if you didn't have a thing with blood. I know, and you'd probably be really, really good at it because you got a good eye for detail and symmetry. And you know all the theory behind everything we do in PMU because you've
Right.
just been hanging around me like all these years. But what were your first thoughts when you?
My first thoughts were that that's what traditional tattoo artists do, and that's where you learned it from,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, right. That's exactly right. So let's go back like 21 years when I was learning PMU. And I learned from a few different PMU people. I had my initial trainer. I did the 6-month apprenticeship with a permanent makeup lady here in Vegas. And I was taught these scratching type, sporadic type movements. And, you know, and then I got with other trainers in PMU, and that's just what I was taught. That's what the PMU industry, or at least the ones I was coming in contact with, making contact with, were moving. I can't even explain the movements. They were just these little scratchy, and I don't mean scratchy, I don't want that to sound offensive, but just these sporadic sketching kind of movements.
Well, that's probably what they learned as well, right? So-
Yeah, yeah. And then about a year and a half into PMU, I went into a full-on body tattoo apprenticeship with one of the best body tattoo artists in Vegas, Eddie Lynn.
I totally remember. That's when you and I started dating, so I remember that very
Yeah.
well. Yeah.
And so, you know, Eddie wanted me to tattoo his mom's eyebrows, and I'm using those movements. And he was just like, what the hell is that?
So he was totally watching you.
He was like totally watching me while I'm tattooing his mom, you know? And then in that body tattoo apprenticeship, that's where I learned, you know, circular movements, whip shading, pendulum, pointillism. Because in body tattoo work, they don't call it pointillism, they call it stippling or dot work. But it's the same thing. It's pointillism. In PMU, we call it pointillism. So I learned all those movements in my traditional tattoo apprenticeship and training. And I just started, for a while, I was making those kind of sketchy type movements for PMU during the day. And then when I would go to the tattoo shop and tattoo, you know, body tattoo clients, I was using these new movements that I learned, you know, from Eddie. I thought they were very separate. And I thought, well, this is what you do in PMU. And this is what you do in body tattoo, and it was very separate. Even the machines were very separate back then. Remember?
Oh, yes. I totally remember.
You had those PMU machines that were thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. And
I remember the one you had didn't last.
It didn't last. I had
Yeah.
one of those little KPs, I think.
Yeah.
And I remember my very first machine. I don't even know what brand. The needle came flying out of it, for Pete's sake. You know, I think it was like $99. But anyway, everything was just so separate back then. And, you know, I even trained with Margie Grimm, you know, and Margie, great tattooer. She did beautiful permanent makeup.
Yes, she did.
Excellent mentor and teacher to me. But she even made those same movements, those same type movements. And I was hanging out with Margie a lot, learning a lot from her. And I was a sponge with her, remember? Because
Yeah.
she just had all this wonderful knowledge and theory stuff. And she just did beautiful work. And then I didn't see Margie for a while. Maybe a year and a half, because I was deep into body tattooing.
Yeah.
Learning all these new movements. So then I go back down to San Jose and I hang out with Margie, and we used to do this thing where she would bring in a model and we would just kind of tattoo and share techniques. She would invite Dawn, right? Dawn
Yeah.
Marrero. And I'm now moving completely different. I'm doing circular, whip shading, shoveling. And do you remember when Margie was like, hold up, wait a minute. What the hell are
I
you
totally
doing?
remember.
What the hell are you doing? What's that? What's that? What are those moves? And I said, well, this is what we do in body tattooing. This is what
You were
I-
doing her eyebrows or something.
I was doing her eyebrows or her eyeliner. It was
Yeah.
on her eyeliner.
Yeah.
And and I did her eyeliner, and I did it like maybe about 45 minutes before I had to go hop a plane to get back to Vegas. And I remember her emailing me, say, well, it's day 2 and all the color is still there, but yet, you know, final, you know, we need to wait, you know, another week before I'll give this, you know, final results. And then she emailed me, you know, maybe 7 or 8 days later, and was like, holy heck, you know, all the colors there. I've had this done several times. There's never been this kind of color here. You got to come back down here and teach me what you did. So I did. Dawn flew back in again. And I was just tattooing her and doing my movements. She booked a model, and I was teaching her, you know, my new techniques, my new way of moving needles that I learned, you know, in body tattooing.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
What did Eddie Lynn think of you doing that type of movement on his mom, the PMU movement?
He immediately corrected me and asked me, what was that? You know, like almost like he wanted me to give a name to it. And I'm like, well, I don't know. And he's like, well, it's not circular, it's not shoveling, it's not whip shading, it's not pendulum, you know, because there's names to the movements, the techniques that we use. And I said, oh, it's just what I was taught. And he corrected me, and he started showing me how to do, you know, movements, you know, legit tattoo movements. Which I just crossed right over into all my PMU work eventually. And that's what changed the game for me. But anyway, so with Margie, and I remember Margie wanted me to name that technique and kind of claim it as my technique and name it. Do you remember all that? And I was so flattered, right? Because, you know, it meant a lot that she really appreciated, you know, these techniques that I learned, and she saw the value in them and what they could produce. But I kept trying to tell her, Margie, I can't name them and claim them. They're tattoo movements. And I remember we went out to dinner, and we were all so excited. Margie was excited. I was excited. We decided to do an eyeliner class and teach these new techniques, right? They were new to PMU,
right?
From what I understand. And
this is a long time ago.
This is 21 years ago.
Right.
21 years ago. And there you have it, you know, and that's just a little bit of history. So my answer to, do I think those movements, and do I think they're old school? And I think no. I think the techniques themselves and the depth in which we implant color, it is not old school nor new school. Those are core fundamental tattoo movements that have been used in body tattooing for over 100 years. I think the style that we give, whether it's a solid, thick eye, skinny brows, I think the style or the look that we're giving can be labeled as old school versus new school. Remember when I first started, it was that super solid look. There was no ombre.
Right.
So that super solid sticker look, maybe that could be considered an old school look. Really skinny brows like Pamela Anderson. Those were popular still when I entered PMU.
Those are huge, yes.
Those are huge. Could that be considered an old school look?
At this point, yes.
At this point, yeah. Or a trend or a fad, right? Or an old school look, I guess. So I think the look, the style can be considered old school, new school.
But not the movements.
But not the movements and not the depth.
Right.
I think, look, the 6 core movements we make in both body tattooing and PMU is circular, shoveling, pointillism, whip shading, pendulum, and then line work. And that's the only little difference when it comes to line work. In body tattooing, we do line work, which is a little bit different of a technique than hair strokes. Right. But it's that linear that linear movement. So we move a little bit differently to create the hair stroke. We call it the hair stroke movement in PMU. And in body tattooing, it's line work.